Get my mic, huh? Can you tell I'm baked? It's been like 3 days since I got high, and it feels good. All right. Headphones. Here we go. Here we go. All right. Doing headphones this time so I can hear myself, so I can really get into it. All right, here we go. Oh yeah, I'm Jeff. El Jefe Tacoma. This is me reading my book, Shattered Worlds, Day 1. Book 4, Chapter 52. Grundle. Beloved mother, Mr. Verkelet wishes to speak with you. The old woman sighed. She'd been trying to write a letter for hours and still wasn't satisfied. She waved for him to enter. Grundle walked in, head bowed, barely clearing the arch. He dropped to one knee. The matriarch snapped at him.
Oh, get up. I haven't the time for all this scraping.
Grundle rose to his feet. Outside the window, he could hear birds chirping. Beloved mother, I come to ask a favor. She looked up from her work. This was new. She motioned for him to sit. Grundle eased into a chair. I know not what business Mother Stargazer is engaged in, beloved mother, but I worry that she is in danger.
Of course you're worried. This is a city of vipers, and Lizette Marshall's tentacles stretch across the galaxy. You'd be a fool not to worry.
Yes, well, I wanted to ask you, he stuttered, shaking with self-doubt, if it would be possible to induct me in the ways of the goddess. I wish to be made a guardian. The old woman gasped. She leaned back in the high seat and stared, taking in the moment. As often happened these days, time seemed slow as she read the patterns of sensation. The birds she could name went unnamed. Motes of dust were nothing but tricks of the light. All was spirit, and spirit was all. The moment grew, blossomed, and died in one impossible instant. She scrawled a note in the margin. Grundle began to speak. I know this is a strange request. I have not the training nor the temperament. Eliane rose to her feet. She could feel the old power imbuing her, strengthening her muscles. She spoke directly from the great beyond.
Grundle Verkelet, you have served your goddess with distinction and humility. You have pledged your life to the service of the holy and righteous. You are hereby granted all the powers and responsibilities of a guardian of the faith. In the name of Zora, the just, the honest, the merciful, I welcome you into the ranks of the undying. Kneel and accept your duty.
She held out her hand, palm down, her ring of office pulsing with power. Grundle bowed his head. She brought her hand slowly up over its mottled bulk and touched him, feather soft. Grundle felt warmer and safer than he'd ever felt. His muscles eased, his fear disappeared. His mind was calm, the merest image of Aeana floating behind his eyelids. Somewhere the goddess stood in quiet respect, her heart beating in time with his own. The moment passed. He opened his eyes. Elian was struggling, leaning against her small wooden desk. He jumped to steady her. She allowed him to slide her into a low divan by the window. She coughed once and rested her head. "Beloved mother," he spoke in a whisper. She pointed at the desk.
The letter. Take it to Aeana. She will know what to do.
She slid the ring off of her. She slid the ring off her finger and pushed it into his palm. It was still warm.
Give her this. She'll need it.
She coughed again. His heart was beating fast. He reached for a handkerchief, but she stopped him.
Go. You are responsible for her safety. You are responsible for all of them. She's in the lower depths. Go with Zora.
So, what's going on with the old matriarch here? What is the deal? Is she sick? Is she putting on a show? What's the deal? Oh, and Grundle has pledged his eternal life to the Church of Zora. So that's a big deal. I never got. Oh, I have Pepsi. Wild cherry Pepsi, baby. What makes it some level of wildness that I'm not aware of? These are important questions. Maybe leave a YouTube comment. Those are safe, right? Damn. My bong, the stem broke, so I'm having to use a pipe. Silent. Oh. Chapter 53. Faline. Silent as the grave, she stalked the halls of darkness. She'd reached the secret chamber after an endless series of tricks and gambits. She regretted the murders, of course, but she'd had no choice. Without money and without the ability to work, she was compelled to skulk across space to reach her victim. It had come to her on the third night of freezing on the shit planet she'd been left on. The real culprit had been Aeana's stargazer, the priestess. If she hadn't come aboard the Horus, none of this would have happened. Faline would have iced Portillion and recovered her daughter without a hitch. The captain had trusted her, which would have made killing the kid a snap. Thanks to that goody-good bitch, she was alone, friendless, and broke. For the first time in her life, she sought vengeance rather than glory. But first, she had to find a way in. The proud men were involved in the effort to retake the statue, which meant they'd be fixing to take out some or all of the quote-unquote heroes. Get in with the prouds and get close to the action. But to do that, she'd have to slash her way to the top. She came to the peephole the merchant had told her about. the spot above the meeting place where the lackeys received their orders. The merchant was loaded, thank goodness, so Faline was able to eat well enough to build up her strength before doing the job. She came to the spot, a small tunnel behind a broken grate that led to the inside of a dragon shaped mask. She whispered the words of magic to activate the protection amulet and leaned in to see what she could see. About 20 feet down, she saw a candlelit chamber, lacquered red pillars, black banners fluttering in a light breeze. All was as described. A small figure in a green kimono sat cross legged on a pillow. A pair of shaking women were kneeling at the bottom of a small staircase, whispering to the seated person. Faline turned up the audio and listened. Faline turned up the audio and listened in. In a few minutes, she had the job. She slid out of the tunnel and made her way to the market. The time for violence had come. I'm not sure what I meant by that. Like, I just mentioned how much violence she'd already done. So, what's special about this day? Guess we'll find out. I feel like I missed a chapter because did Maki ever talk to Kajan? Like, because now I'm in the middle of the fight. Maki returns to the temple. Holy shit. The chapter. Did I read the second part of this? The wind was merciless. She was home, and God's it feels good. I guess it took me a while to get back to this. The tunnel opened up to reveal an enormous spherical chamber. Hacks are carrying the ready cross of pain. I probably did mention this. This would have been chapter 46. Anyway, in case I didn't, she's starting a fight. Chapter 40. Chapter 54, Maki. Hiya! Darwok brought his heel down sideways, his shout catching Maki off guard. She winced as the gigantic foot crashed down on the side of her thigh. She rolled with the momentum, slashing out with her left hand, fingers locked in tiger fashion, the hardened skin acting like a knife blade. The strike caught him in the groin. He cried out in pain. As she rolled, she plotted her next 7 moves. She tried to never act without a plan. She was rarely without a blade somewhere on her person, but in this case, it was probably for the best. Darwok might have been the best knife man Kajan had ever produced. No need to add a bloody death to her list of accomplishments just yet. Darwok reeled a bit at first, then whirled into a storm of action. He leapt what seemed like 10 feet to the side of one of the lion statues, then hurtled over her to the last place she expected him to be. The ground shook as he landed, his giant hands grabbing her by the chest and yanking her above his head. Fuck this, she thought, the pain tearing at her consciousness. She kicked hard into his gut with her cyber foot, bending the toes into a knife shape, and swung out in a tight arc, slashing his belly with a cut 2 inches wide and 6 inches long. He screamed and threw her an impossible distance, a thin arc of his blood following her as she flew. She let her muscles go slack as she crashed into a stone pillar. The whole ceiling shook from the impact, dust and pebbles pouring from above. She screamed as pain flooded her system. Her feet and hands swung beneath her on instinct, landing like a cat behind Kajan, who deftly sidestepped the action like a referee watching the sideline of a game. Darwalk ran like a Vorok, 3 paces at a time. She spun in a wicked cartwheel, just missing his massive tucked shoulder. As she zipped mere inches out of reach, he crashed into the altar, completely crushing it, sending priceless papers and shards of wood flying everywhere. She felt the sting of splinters pierce her skin as if a grenade had gone off. She nearly rolled right off the side of the platform, but corrected at the last second, pulling up and bounding off one of the pillars. As Darwalk wheeled around, she saw he was clutching 2 nasty pieces of the busted altar and wielding them like swords. She knew he was cheating, but she also knew Kajan wanted a show. He was unlikely to call a brawl on account of a few improvised weapons. This was where things would get interesting. She knew Darwalk. He would move like a swordsman now, slashing and pounding to pull her into disarm stance, then headbutting or slashing her knees when she went to make the lock. Instead, she did the opposite, diving to the ground and spinning, dance move style under his sticks, kicking with both legs hard into his groin. She felt them crunch. The fucker's skin was like heavy armor, but it threw him off just enough for her to come up behind him and tap, tap, tap on his kidney. 3 taps and the thing was a bloody mess. Internal injuries were a bitch for a big man. Her plan was to slow him down enough to gain the upper hand. But Darwalk wasn't stupid, at least not completely. He thrust one stick behind him and twisted, adding just enough force to shove it into her chest. She lost her breath for a second, at which his foot came right up to her stomach and pushed. She flew again, clattering. I don't know why I paused on that. I was thinking about, like, is this all making sense? She lost her breath for a second, at which his foot came right up to her stomach and pushed. She flew again, clattering amidst the remaining rocks and bits of altar. Her head bounced off the ground as Kajan danced away again. She was stunned. It was hard to make her limbs work. She was going to lose for sure. As he walked in her direction, he raised his meaty fists above his head. What is this? Professional wrestling? It has to be a trick. Just then, a voice entered her mind. Sweep the leg. What the fuck? Sweep the leg. She didn't know who or what was talking, but she figured she had enough strength left to do that much. So sweep she did. She charged up as much tension in her leg as she could, then popped it out and around halfway through one of his shuffling steps. The fucker went down hard. His hands were up so high he didn't have time to brace himself. And he was so jacked on adrenaline he didn't have time to loosen his muscles. He hit the mat with an enormous crash. His head bounced twice and then slid right into the base of a pillar. Her strength back, she kicked up and wheeled her leg over her head in a ridiculous cartwheel strike. As her heel came down, he looked up. The pop of armored heel against hard as fuck skull was deafening. She'd won. He was out. Kajan counted to 10 and it was over. He walked over to Darwalk's head and studied the big man's movements. Satisfied he was alive, he kicked Darwalk in the ribs. Darwalk rolled into a crouch and made the slow, wobbly climb to stand, his palm pressed against a pillar to keep himself upright. She looked at Kajan and said, "Are we done?" He nodded. He snapped his fingers, and reality opened once again. Darwalk floated backwards away from the platform, and then he was gone. Kajan drew the ready cross of pain from his sash and handed it, hilt first, to Maki. She was victorious. If only she hadn't been in such intense agony, she might have kissed Kajan then and there. Let's see. Oh, it's already 20 minutes. All right. I'll wrap that up there and come back for the next one. I love that fight. Hand-to-hand combat, baby. All right. See you soon. Oh, I guess one thing I could say about that chapter is that we get a chance to see how calculating she is and how like everything's like a game of chess, even battle for her, which I just feel like is pretty rad. Um and this is a bit of a spoiler, but keep an eye on the Cross of Pain because that shit is dope. All right. Peace. Have yourselves a good evening or whatever. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you later.